Summer in Madrid. I sit huddled against the wall, knees drawn up to my chest. Next to me, my battered old phone vibrates. It's Marcy, my adult daughter. She has tried calling a few times today, but I haven't answered. I don't feel like talking yet. Besides, my hands are full. I'm gripping a pistol so tightly that my knuckles are beginning to turn white. I have never used a pistol before. I probably won't need it though. This is just a precaution. Just in case. Just until after my eyes dart to my phone. It has stopped ringing. November 9th, 2019. The display reads 11:09 p.m. Just 3 more minutes, then it will all be over. That's all. Just 3 minutes. I'm probably being childish, right? After all, it's been almost 10 years. 10 years since that summer trip to Madrid with my late wife. 10 years since, while weaving through the crowd, I felt those strong fingers suddenly grab my wrist from behind, ice cold despite the sweaty crowd and the summer heat. 10 years since I turned around and saw the little girl in that bright floral dress. 10 years since I looked into those glazed, dead eyes. Since horrible chills like I had never felt before washed over my body. Since that little girl opened her mouth and in too perfect English whispered the words I would never forget.
November 9th,
She said sweetly.
2019, 11:12 p.m. Everything ends.
The little girl disappeared into the crowd right after that. When I told my wife about it afterwards, she laughed it off. There were plenty of crazies on the streets of Madrid, she said. And she was right. Plenty of crazies. In fact, if she were still alive, she would think I was the crazy one for sitting here, back to the wall with a pistol in my hands. And yet, those eyes. Tearing my mind off the past, I looked down at the phone again. 11:12 p.m. My heart plummets. Immediately my blood runs cold, and I can hear my pulse pounding in my head. This is ridiculous, I think, squeezing my eyes shut. Nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. Suddenly, the door opens.
Dad, are you...
I hear the gunshot before I register what is happening. I watch in horror as Marcy, my only daughter, drops silently to the ground, falling as if in slow motion. And I watch, frozen, as a beautiful red stain blossoms across her white shirt and pools on the tile floor. Her eyes stare up at me, accusing. I have seen them before. Those glazed, dead eyes. I am still sitting motionless on the floor when I hear the sirens outside. I thought the worst thing ever to happen to a man was his wife cheating on him with his neighbor. But I was so wrong. Yes, that happened. Clara cheated on me with John, my next-door neighbor. When I learned about it, I kicked her out of my house. I could hear their voices through the thin walls, and it was really annoying for me. No matter how hard I would try to distract myself, it wouldn't work. I could hear them having fun, speaking about normal daily stuff, arguing. Hell, I could even hear them making love. I was on a budget, and I wouldn't even want to talk to them, so I decided to move whenever I could afford it. John turned out to be a prick after this whole scandal. Once I heard him ask Clara, "Why did you leave Mark for me, baby girl?" And she replied,
You know, he was always imagining things. He acted stupid, and of course he wasn't neither as smart nor as attractive as you.
To which John replied with joy, "Oh, I see. That's my girl." Then she said,
Fuck everybody else anyways.
and I could hear them kissing loudly. At some point, I was convinced that they did these things only because they knew I could hear them, and they just wanted to annoy the hell out of me. Fast forward, last night, I survived a car accident. You might guess it correctly. I drove fast because of cycling all these old thoughts and memories in my head. After the crash, I figured out nobody was around, and even my nose wasn't bleeding. I got up and went home, drained out of energy. I laid myself on the bed and fell asleep. I woke up to Clara's voice coming from the other block, weeping and stuttering.
Who, Clara? Who? What happened? God damn it, Clara, what the fuck happened?
He died in an accident in his own car. Dad, I went to buy groceries, and I heard this loud sound. So I turned around and saw him drowning in his own blood. And his head was barely chopped off.
It was then that she burst into tears, even harder than before. I fell asleep before I could hear the rest of their conversation. Just bones. We bought the farm from Granddad at a bargain basement rate. He figured it'd be fair for us to pay exactly what he paid in 1968, about 1/10 of its current value. There were issues with the property, sure, but Joe and I couldn't rightly complain. We replaced the furnace, drained the septic, installed a water softener. We even shelled out a few grand to fix the sagging front porch. That was when the trouble began. Joe woke up to find Dan, the contractor man, holding a dirt-stained jawbone he'd unearthed amidst the worms under the porch. "This here's Micmac territory," Dan explained, turning the bone over in his hands. "Probably your grandpappy built his abode atop one of their old burying grounds."
Should we call the sheriff?
Joe asked, slipping her phone out the back pocket of her jeans. "That's the law, sure," said Dan, between drags on a stubby cigarette. "Sheriff will come out here, dig up the porch, dig out the foundation, maybe have to tear your whole house down, tie you up in the court for years. And why? Just so they can bury these bones again in some other worthless patch of dirt." Joe and I exchanged glances.
So can we call the sheriff, or...
"Or," Dan shrugged, then simply tossed the jawbone back in the hole and held an index finger to his lips. They were just bones, after all, buried hundreds of years. They'd remain buried another 100 of years, with none the wiser. We'd say a prayer for them at dinner, whatever. That didn't sit well with Joe. She hardly slept, tossing and turning, consumed by guilt. She read about the Micmac people, how they'd been mistreated, cast aside throughout history. Our first planting didn't take, dried up and withered despite plentiful rains, and Joe became convinced the land was cursed.
We're being tested,
She told me.
We got no right to this place. Our ancestors took it by steel and bloodshed. We barely paid nothing for it. We have the opportunity to do right, and we ain't doing it.
Eventually, I called the sheriff. I admitted I had discovered the bones. I left out Joe's participation, accepting all blame for failing to report the discovery. The sheriff, himself Micmac, attended at the property immediately. I took him to where we'd reburied the bones. He would barely look at me. A few hours into the excavation, the sheriff knocked on the door.
"These bones ain't buried in the Mi'kmaq way,"
He spat. I scratched my neck. I'm sorry, I didn't know the customs when I reburied them." But the sheriff shook his head.
"No, they aren't buried in animal skins. They weren't buried seated upright. The graves are much too shallow. Everything about them is wrong.
"So, what are you saying?"
This isn't a Mi'kmaq burial site. These bones are fresh."
I felt my jaw fall slack. How fresh?
20, 30 years. You said you bought this place from your granddad?